None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you.
That's it! You're locked in here with me!
This is Watchmen, and it's a movie that took almost 3 decades to make. This is also Watchmen, and this, and this. These are all adaptations of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' seminal graphic novel of the same name, but the journey getting these characters from page to screen is one of twists, betrayal, and heartbreak. Watchmen has become one of, if not the, most important comics in the Western canon, and that's due almost completely to the 2 men who created it. These 2 stalwarts of the English comic scene made the jump across the pond during the early 1980s. They were just 2 of the names spearheading the British invasion, a large-scale transplanting of UK talent into the American comics field. This influx of artists and writers is largely responsible for many of the medium's largest successes like Animal Man, Sandman, and Shade the Changing Man. The explosion of talent and ideas heralded a changing of the standards by which comics were measured against. Needless to say, it was a halcyon era for DC, and Alan Moore was at the top of that heap. With titles like Swamp Thing, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Killing Joke, he claimed the throne as the most important writer working in the medium.
My name's Alan Moore. I write comics.
So when he heard that DC had landed the rights to the Charlton Comics library after a bankruptcy sale, he submitted a pitch, a murder mystery starring characters owned by the aforementioned company. DC's at the time editor-in-chief Dick Giordano suggested that Moore create new characters because, well, they just spent a bunch of money on all these superheroes and Alan Moore wanted to either kill or render them useless. And so that's exactly what Alan Moore did, all the while working under the promise that he and Gibbons could own these new creations after they were finished. You see, the history of the medium up until that point was that the company producing the books would own the characters, and the creators rarely shared in the profits generated by those characters. When asked about the ownership issue at the time of publication at San Diego Comic-Con, Moore said, "The way it works, if I understand it, is that DC owns it for the time they're publishing it, and then it reverts to Dave and me, so we can make all the money from the Slurpee cups." The only problem is, he really didn't understand how it worked. He trusted DC to do right by him, didn't hire a lawyer, and just signed the contract as it was presented to him, only to later realize that DC owns the characters until the book goes out of print. But it became the highest selling comic of all time, and has never gone out of print.
Must be drunk already. Telling you this sob story again.
I think you were trying to make a point.
You see, at this point in time, comics were published as single issues. They had a print run in the thousands, and then, when those were sold, that's all there ever was. Upon its release, the book achieved widespread acclaim, so much so that it was eventually included in Time magazine's 100 Greatest Novels. It's the only comic ever to be included on that list. What evolved was a somewhat uncomfortable status quo. DC had told Moore that they wouldn't be making any money off of Watchmen merchandise. They'd just be making money off the sales from the book itself. But this all went sideways when DC started selling Watchmen buttons. DC claimed that they weren't merchandise, but instead promotional pieces for the book. Moore saw it differently. He saw any product being sold based on his characters as merch. He viewed this as a major violation of their trust. Eventually, they were able to come to a common ground, but Moore remained suspicious of DC overall, and his wariness was for good reason. You see, at the time, DC was also putting together a Watchmen role-playing game, one they didn't tell Alan Moore about. DC and Mayfair Games had struck up a licensing deal, which obviously rubbed Moore the wrong way again.
You sound bitter.
Me? Bitter? No. I think it's hilarious.
Luckily for them, they were able to talk him down and regain his confidence again, and Moore then worked with Mayfair and DC to make sure that the gaming modules, Who Watches the Watchmen and Taking Out the Trash, were in line with Watchmen canon. Outside of the book itself, these 2 role-playing game modules are the most in-universe writing Moore has done for the Watchmen since creating the original book. They're also largely unseen, having never been reprinted. After the game project wrapped up, the magnitude of Watchmen never going out of print started to dawn on Moore and Gibbons. So what tipped them off that the book was never going out of print and their rights were never reverting? The implementation of the graphic novel. Prior to Watchmen, a collection of a comic book series was not a thing. However, after Watchmen was serialized in single issues, it was collected into a single volume and remains a bestseller to this day. Needless to say, this angered Moore and he promised to never work for DC again. The only exception to this rule, when various film and TV studios would pop up attempting to make a film of their classic comic book. Loads of interesting people attempted it, but they all failed. So how did these various film projects get off the ground with all the behind-the-scenes conflicts regarding the rights to the book?
Why do you care about that right-wing rag so much? Those don't give a about you, pal. Hold up.
Well, Moore and Gibbons had signed re-optioning papers a few times over the years because they naively thought the film would literally never get made. And for years, they were right. But that didn't stop the influence of the book being felt. DC eventually reached out to Moore asking him to write a sequel book, multiple times. He didn't want to. They reached out again and said they would literally give him back all the rights to Watchmen if he just would write Watchmen 2. He still said no. The book was always intended to be a standalone story. He wanted nothing to do with DC. From his perspective, they'd burned him before, they would burn him again. Eventually, Watchmen would finally make it to the big screen in 2009. Directed by Zack Snyder, the film was released to mixed critical reviews and a middling box office. Some criticism was levied at the film that it was too devoted to the original work. Others maligned the fact that while Moore was commenting on the objectivist overtones in many superhero stories, Snyder was exalting them, missing the point that by deconstructing these themes, he was satirizing them. Ultimately, having been burned by DC numerous times by now, Moore wanted nothing to do with the film. Even though he had signed the option years ago, he wanted his name taken off the credits and refused any of the money he was due in residuals, opting instead to pass those along to Dave Gibbons, asking only that Gibbons says thank you. Since the release of the Snyder rendition of Watchmen, we've gotten a 2-part animated adaptation and the HBO series created by Damon Lindelof. The Watchmen characters have also shown up in the DCU proper, going head-to-head with Superman and Jeff Johns' Doomsday Clock. The company isn't even pretending to be civil with the characters that were supposed to belong to Moore and Gibbons in the first place.
You know who you are. You still have his face.
But those were all one-off projects. DC's biggest Watchmen tie-in was their publishing initiative before Watchmen. It was a whole tie-in line of comics that were released when Snyder's movie premiered. Purportedly, Gibbons was paid $250,000 to endorse the release of these prequel stories. Moore was courted as well, but turned down the money. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons are Watchmen. Without them, there's no chance at making new stories that are worth anything. Watchmen is a towering work. You have to respect its place in the history of comics. The fact that the contractual disputes and bad blood from everyone involved has continued is a shame. Watchmen is a landmark achievement, and under normal circumstances, film adaptations would be an intrinsic part of how our culture celebrates that artistic accomplishment. However, in the ultimate twist of ironic fate, this is the exact opposite in this case. Every adaptation of the book is a stark reminder of the core betrayal central to the artist's crucial oversight. Now, imagine what would have happened if Moore and Gibbons had either been treated better or had, a lawyer look over the contracts. Who knows what great works of art we would have gotten if everyone hadn't wasted so much time fighting over scraps. Well, what do you think? Will we ever have a book with the cultural importance of Watchmen again? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos just like this.